Tell me it's not true. Tell me a 3-star did not give up his seat for the lady Kirby bumped. The airman behind the counter set it low at 0600 hours, the morning after. The terminal was almost empty. 2 rows of bolted chairs, a cold coffee urn, a television running with the sound off. The other airman did not answer right away. He looked at the far wall, at an empty bench, and he did not smile. "It's true," he said. "I was standing right there. I'll be thinking about it for the rest of my life." Wind back the clock. 26 hours. Same terminal, full to the walls, a rotator loading in 3 hours, and 140 people who all wanted on it. These don't scan for the priority you're claiming. Staff Sergeant Dane Kirby said it without looking up. He worked the passenger service counter the way a tired man works a long line, fast and flat, and he had a printout of travel orders in his 2 hands, and the woman across the counter was watching him the way you watch weather. "I'm not walking it down for one traveler," Kirby said. "I've got 140 people and one of me. Step aside and rebook space available like everybody else." He tore the orders in half. He did it without drama. A tired flick of the wrists, paper parting along a fold, 2 halves set on the counter and pushed an inch toward her. Next in line. "Move it along." The woman did not raise her voice. She did not raise anything. "Understood," she said. 1 word. She reached out and took the 2 halves off the counter. She folded them together, once, then again, into an exact quarter, corners squared, the way a person folds a flag or a letter that matters. Then she picked up a scuffed green duffel, turned, and walked to the far wall, and sat down on the empty end of a bench, and set the duffel at her boots, and folded her hands over the torn paper in her lap. Her name was Master Sergeant Maren Ashby. She was 44 years old. She wore jeans and a plain jacket, and no rank, and no ribbons, and nothing at all that told the room what she was. There were maybe 140 people in that terminal, and only one of them looked at her twice. That one was an old man 2 rows over. Retired. You could tell the retired ones by the haircut they kept out of habit, and the way they sat, square to the room, back to the wall. He had a paper cup of coffee going cold in his hand. He had been halfway through a crossword. He was not doing the crossword anymore. He was watching the woman on the bench. He had spent 30 years learning to read men in terminals, airports, ports, rail platforms, the plywood terminals of places that did not go on postcards. He knew what a person looked like when they lost. This was not that. This was the stillness of a person who had already survived the worst day a person can survive, and found terminals easy after. The old man set his coffee on the floor. He knew the room. He had lived in rooms like it. A passenger terminal is its own small country, with its own weather and its own laws. And the first law is that everyone is tired, and no one is going where they want to, as fast as they want to get there. The urn was always empty, or always burnt. The chairs were always bolted a hand's width too close. The board flickered and lied. Men who ran counters in rooms like this got hard the way water gets hard in winter, from the outside in, and most of them thawed once a shift and refroze by the next. He did not hate Kirby for what he had just watched. He had been Kirby a long time ago on a bad night, and someone had walked his own orders down for him when they did not have to, and he had spent the 30 years since trying to be that someone for the next tired person in the next hard room. He looked at the woman on the bench and knew, the way you know weather, that this was going to be one of those mornings. Maren Ashby folded her hands over her torn orders and waited, and the line moved on without her, and the television on the wall played footage of a homecoming with the sound turned off. She watched a family on the screen and did not let her face do anything. The clock over the counter said 3 hours to the rotator. She had waited longer for less. She settled into the weight the way a soldier settles into any weight, all the way, without complaint, the body still and the eyes moving, and she let the morning come. The first crack in the morning was not hers. It belonged to a young spouse with 2 kids and a stroller and a face coming apart at the seams. She had been bumped. She did not understand why. She stood at the end of Kirby's counter with a phone in one hand and a boarding slip in the other, and she kept saying the same thing in a rising voice, that her husband was meeting them, that they had to make tonight, that the machine had put her in a category she did not understand. Kirby was not cruel to her. That was the thing you had to say about Kirby, and it made everything harder to hold. He was not cruel. He was slammed. He told her the categories were the categories, that space available meant available, that he could not conjure a seat out of the floor, and he said it fast and flat and turned to the next passenger before she had finished hearing it. The young spouse drifted toward the wall, toward the bench, toward the only still point in the room. Maren Ashby looked up. "You're Category 3, she said. Quiet. Just for the spouse. "Not 5. The machine defaulted you low because your sponsor's orders posted late. Go back up. Ask for the 6 o'clock rotator, not the 4. Say Category 3 and the late posting. You'll make it." The spouse stared at her. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." She was. She said it the way you say a thing you have known for 20 years. The spouse went back up the line and said Category 3 and said the late posting, and the machine agreed with her, and 30 seconds later, she was on the 6 o'clock with both kids, crying now for a different reason, and she never once learned the name of the woman on the bench. Kirby half heard it. He caught the tail of the fix, the Category 3, the way it unstuck his own line, and some tired animal part of him noted that the faked orders lady had just cleared a snarl off his counter. He filed it under annoyance. He did not file it under signal. A man certain he already knows what he is looking at does not check the label twice. The old man against the wall watched the whole thing. He watched competence put on plain clothes and sit quietly in the corner and fix a stranger's whole night for nothing, for no credit, for no seat of her own. He picked his coffee back up. It had gone cold. He drank it anyway. There was a second one 20 minutes later, an old veteran in a ball cap with a unit patch on it, trying to fly space available to a funeral, getting the categories wrong, getting louder as he got them wronger, the way fear gets loud in old men. The counter was losing patience with him. Maren caught his eye from the bench, and when he drifted her way, defeated, she told him the same kind of thing she had told the spouse. Which desk, which words, which flight. She did it quietly, without making him feel the help, which is its own skill, maybe the rarest one. The old veteran went back up and got his seat to the funeral, and came back to shake her hand, and she shook it, and he never knew he had just been carried across a river by someone who had carried harder things across worse water. The old man against the wall watched competence put on plain clothes and sit quietly in the corner and fix 2 strangers whole days for nothing. No credit. No seat of her own. He had seen a lot of rank in 30 years. He had learned that the realest kind almost never announced itself. The realest kind sat on a bench and fixed your night and let you think it was luck. He picked his coffee back up. It had gone cold. He drank it anyway. The family made the list. The old veteran made his funeral. Maren Ashby was still against the wall, still bumped, still folded over a torn set of orders, still waiting, still the calmest thing in a loud room. By the second hour, the counter had made up its mind about her, and a counter that has made up its mind is a hard thing to sit near. It started small. A nickname passed low between 2 airmen. The homecoming footage on the television, still silent, cycled to a graphic of a citation, a pale blue ribbon, a name blurred out for the segment. and one of the younger airmen jerked a thumb at it, and then at the woman on the wall, and grinned. His name was Kip Sorensen, Airman First Class, 20 years old, 6 months on the job. He wanted, more than he wanted almost anything, to belong to the crew he had landed in, and the fastest currency a young man knows for belonging is a laugh at someone who will not laugh back. "Bet she made those orders on a home printer," Sorensen said, loud enough. "People try it all the time. Print 'em up, act offended when you catch it." A couple of the counter crew smiled. Not all of them. But a couple, and a couple is enough to keep a young man going. If you have ever sat in a room and been decided about by people who never once asked you a question, you know the particular quiet of that bench. You know what it costs to keep your hands still. Stay with her. The room is about to find out exactly what it has been laughing at, and it is going to find out all at once. Marin Ashby watched the homecoming footage, a unit coming down a ramp into a hangar full of families. Signs and balloons, and a little girl on a father's shoulders. She watched it without expression, the way you look at a thing that is both very far away and permanently inside you. Then she looked down and squared the torn orders in her lap one more time, corners to corners, and folded her hands back over them. The old man moved one seat closer to her. He did not speak. It was not his to spend. A man does not open another person's cover just to be the one who knew. But he moved one seat closer, so that the space around her was a little less empty, a little less a thing the room had done on purpose. The nickname found its legs the way nicknames do. Somebody called her the printer lady, and somebody improved it. And by the middle of the hour, there was a small, ugly mythology going up around the woman on the bench, the way frost goes up a window, and none of it had a single fact in it. That is the thing about a counter that has decided. It stops collecting facts. It only collects proof of what it already believes, and there is always proof, if you have stopped needing it to be true. Sorensen kept at it, because the first laugh had fed him, and a young man will chase a second laugh a long way, past where he should stop. He did a little imitation of the woman folding her orders, prim and careful, and got a chuckle. And then he caught the old sergeant major looking at him from 2 rows over, just looking, not saying anything. And the chuckle died in the boy's throat for reasons he could not have named. There is a kind of quiet from an old soldier that lands harder than any shout. Sorensen went back to his screen and did not do the imitation again. Kirby did not notice any of it. Not really. He was inside the counter, inside the 140, inside the tunnel. A hard shift builds around a man until the only real things are the ones on his own screen. The woman on the bench had become, to him, a settled matter, a closed file, a thing he had already decided about and did not have to think about again. That is how it happens. Not with cruelty. With a closed file and a long line and a certainty that does not check itself, the television cycled off the citation and back to the ramp and the balloons, and the morning ground on, and the woman on the bench waited and squared her torn orders and waited some more. Kirby decided to make it official a little after the 3rd hour, because a certain kind of tired man cannot leave a loose thing alone. He did not do it out of spite. You had to keep saying that. It was the whole shape of the thing. He did it to clear his own counter and his own conscience at once. He pulled up the woman's record and entered a note, flagging her orders for verification, which in the grammar of the system meant she dropped to the bottom of every list for every flight for the rest of the day. Verified when? By whom? The note did not say. The note never says. It just sits there and sinks you. He came out from behind the counter to tell her, which was, in its way, the closest thing to decency he managed all day. "I've flagged your orders for verification," Kirby said. "Until that clears, you're not going to make a rotator tonight. Maybe not tomorrow. You can wait, or you can find another way home. I'd find another way. Marin Ashby looked up at him. There was nothing in her face he could use. No anger to push against. No fear to feed on. "I'll wait," she said. 2 words. She said them the way you say a thing you have said to worse rooms. She had waited on a ridge for a bird that took 40 minutes to come. She had waited in a hospital hallway for a name to be read that she already knew. She had waited through a ceremony she did not feel she had earned, standing at attention while a nation said her name, and she thought about a 19-year-old who would never hear his own said that way. A terminal bench was not a hard place to wait. A terminal bench was almost restful, measured against the places she had learned patience. She did not reach into her jacket. She did not lay a card on the counter or a rank on the floor or a medal on the table between them. She had, in one pocket, the whole truth of who she was, the kind of truth that would have turned the counter to ash in a heartbeat, and she left it in the pocket. A person who spends the truth to win a seat has misunderstood the truth. She would wait. She had waited in worse rooms than this one, on worse benches, for worse things than a flight. The old man could not stay all the way out of it. He got up, crossed to the counter, and put himself in front of Kirby, low and level. An old sergeant major's voice pitched under the noise. "Son, you want to walk those orders down before that flight?" "Not after." Kirby barely looked at him. "Everybody's got advice today. Sit down, Sergeant Major. I've got 140 people." The old man held his eyes a second. Then he stepped back. "Because you do not win the whole war at one counter, and there was more of this coming." The old man went back to his seat. It cost him. You could see it cost him, the way it costs a man to watch a thing he could stop and choose to let it run one more turn, because he knows the stopping has to come from somewhere else to matter. He sat down. He put his hands on his knees. He watched the woman on the bench take the flag the way she had taken everything else, without a word, the calm going all the way down. Because here is what the flag did, the part Kirby could not see from inside his tunnel. It did not just sink her. It sank the 2 liaison seats the evening rotator was holding, because the verification note locked the whole priority block until someone with the right access cleared it, and no one with the right access was going to look at that queue before the flight. Kirby had reached for a small, tidy thing and knocked over a large, untidy one, and he did not know it, and the woman on the bench knew it and said nothing, because a woman does not spend the truth to win a seat, and she does not spend it to fix another man's mistake either, not when the mistake will teach him more than the fix ever could. Kirby turned to his screen, and down at the mouth of the concourse, a knot of people came through the doors with the particular gravity of a general's party, aides and a security man and a stars-on-the-collar stillness moving in the center of them. The old man placed her while the general's party was still 40 feet out. It came to him the way these things come, sideways and all at once. The calm, the bearing that stayed straight without a uniform to hold it up. And a name, half remembered off a citation he had read years ago and never quite let go of, the way you never quite let go of the ones that make the back of your neck cold. Ashby. He was almost sure. He had been almost sure for an hour and had not let himself finish the thought, because finishing it meant the room had done something it could not take back. He tried one more time, because he was a certain kind of man, too, and his kind could not leave it alone either. "Kirby," he said it quiet at the end of the counter. "Listen to me one time. The ones who never tell you what they are. Those are the ones you walk the orders down for. Every single time. The loud ones, the ones flashing rank at you, they're nothing. It's the quiet one on the bench that ends careers. I have buried better men than you for less than what you did this morning. Kirby opened his mouth. Then the general's party reached the center of the terminal, and a lieutenant general, with 3 stars on his collar, peeled off from his aides to shake hands with a cluster of young soldiers headed downrange, and every counter in the place straightened its spine at once, and whatever Kirby was going to say went unsaid. The general's name was Reed Calloway, 60 years old, 3 stars. He had the easy, unhurried way of a man who had stopped needing to prove anything to a room 3 ranks ago. He talked to the young soldiers for a minute. He asked them where they were from. He meant it. He always meant it. That was the thing his soldiers said about him, the thing that had carried him up from a scared lieutenant colonel in a valley to 3 stars and a schedule that owned every minute of his day. That when he asked where you were from, he was actually asking, and he actually listened to the answer. He asked these young ones the same. A kid from a small town in the mountains, a kid from a coast, a kid who had never flown before this week and was trying not to show it. Calloway put a hand on that one's shoulder and told him the first flight was the worst one, and it only got easier. And the kid believed him, because you believe a man with 3 stars who takes the time. Then Calloway told them to look out for each other over there, that everything else was noise, that the only thing that had ever mattered on any hill he had ever stood on was whether the person beside you knew you would come back for them. He said it lightly. He was not being light. He had learned that sentence on a ridge in 2005, watching a sergeant prove it, and he had built a whole career on it since. On the far wall, on the bench, Marin Ashby saw him. She went very still. Not the still of a person waiting out an insult, a different still. The still of 21 years folding shut like a book. She knew that face. She had known it when it was younger, and terrified, and screaming her name up a ridgeline it could not climb. She looked at Lieutenant General Reed Calloway across 140 strangers, and something moved behind her eyes that the whole morning of insults had not been able to touch. Calloway finished with the young soldiers. He straightened, and he scanned the terminal the way old commanders always scan a room, out of a habit 30 years deep, counting heads, reading the space. His eyes crossed the far wall and moved on, and then, a half-second later, came back. He did not know yet. He would tell people afterward that he did not know, not consciously, not in words. He only knew that something on that far bench had pulled his eye, the way a familiar face pulls your eye across a crowded street before your mind has caught up to why. He stood there a moment, 40 feet off, a 3-star general with a schedule and a plane and 100 things pulling at him, and he looked at a woman in jeans he could not yet name, and the noise of the terminal went on around the 2 of them without knowing anything had started. Brennan saw the general look. Brennan saw the woman not look back, saw her hold still the way she had held still all morning, and understood that she had seen the general a full minute before the general saw her, and had chosen to sit with it rather than rise into it. That was the whole woman, right there. She had seen it coming, and she had waited, because she always waited, because waiting was the thing she was better at than anyone in the building. Here is who she was, while the general turned. Master Sergeant, 24 years in. And under the jeans and the plain jacket, folded away where a duffel and a bench could not see it, the pale blue ribbon that is the nation's highest word for what a person did on the worst morning of their life. The Medal of Honor. She did not wear it to travel. You do not pin the medal to a jacket to sit in a terminal. But she had earned it on a morning in 2005, and the earning had a shape. She was 23 that year, a sergeant. The high ground was a bare ridgeline above a valley, and the ambush came up out of the valley at first light, and the platoon took it hard and fast, and found itself broken across a slope with the wounded on the wrong side of the fire. Sergeant Ashby went up instead of down. She held the high ground alone long enough for it to matter. And then she started carrying men down the ridge, one at a time, across open rock, back down to where the valley floor and the rest of the battalion could reach them. One at a time. She counted them as she went. She had always counted. A number said out loud is a number that is real, and on a morning like that, one you hold on to anything that is real. She got them down. Almost all of them. Specialist Marcus Lowe was 19 years old, and he was the last man on the ridge, and she went back up for him the way she had gone back up for all of them, and she did not bring him down. There are mornings that give you everyone but one. Hers gave her everyone but Marcus Lowe. She has measured her life against that one ever since, the way you measure a room against the one window that will not close. She did not talk about the ridge. That was the other thing to know about her. In 21 years, she had said fewer words about that morning than most people say about a bad commute. When the reporters came in the year of the medal, she gave them almost nothing, and what she gave them was about the others, never herself. She let a nation put its highest word on her, and she carried the word the way she carried everything, quietly, squared away, without spending it. Some recipients wear it into every room. She wore it into almost none. She had decided, somewhere on the way down that ridge, that the medal belonged more to Marcus Lowe than to her, and that a thing you carry for the dead is not a thing you flash at a counter to get a better seat. Down in the valley, a battalion commander named Lieutenant Colonel Reed Calloway had watched the whole thing through glass and could not reach them, could not fix it, could only watch a 23-year-old sergeant do what his whole battalion could not. He had screamed into a radio that could not help her. He had sent men up who could not get there in time. And when it was over, he had climbed the ridge himself in the after quiet and found her sitting with the last man she could not bring down, and he had not said anything because there was nothing, and he had learned more about command in that silence than in the 20 years of it that followed. When the paperwork came, he wrote the recommendation himself, in his own hand. He has told the story at 100 dinners since, to colonels and congressmen and his own grown children, and he has never once gotten through it with a dry voice, and he has never once stopped looking, in every terminal and every hallway and every crowd, for the back of a head he would know anywhere. 21 years later, across a crowded terminal, he was turning toward the far wall, and the only two people in the building who knew what was about to happen were a retired sergeant major on his feet and a woman on a bench with her hands folded over a torn set of orders. She brought down everyone she could reach. She has measured every day since by the one she could not. Kirby crossed the last line while the general was still 10 feet away, because panic makes a certain kind of man tidy, and a tidy man clears the priority seating. He came around the counter fast. He saw the woman on the bench and the general's party bearing down, and his whole rattled morning narrowed to one urgent, stupid need: to have the good seats empty and correct when the stars arrived. He reached down and swept Marin Ashby's duffel off the bench. He did it with the back of his hand, the way you clear a table, and the green duffel hit the floor and slid, and he told her to move. "Priority seatings for priority packs," Kirby said. "Grab your bag and clear the row. The general's party's coming through." The terminal felt it. A bag hitting the floor is a loud thing in a quiet place. Heads turned. Sorensen, over at the counter, stopped mid-grin. The old sergeant major was already coming up out of his chair. Marin Ashby looked at the duffel on the floor. She looked at it without heat, the way a person looks at a thing that has nothing to do with who they are. Then she looked up at Dane Kirby's face, close now, and she smiled. It was a small smile. It did not reach for anything. It was, plainly, the calmest thing in the room, and it should have frightened him more than any shout. She smiled at him, the way you smile at weather you have already survived. The way you smile at a storm from a warm window years later, when you have long since learned it could not have you. It's all right, she said. Not to defend herself, to settle him. It was the voice she had used on a ridge, on frightened men half her size, with twice her fear. The voice that said, "The world is on fire, and I have already done the math, and we are going to be all right." And it worked on Kirby the way it had worked on all of them. Some animal part of him going quiet against its own will, confused by the calm, unable to find the fight it had come looking for. He stood there with the back of his hand still out, and no idea what to do with a person who would not give him the reaction his morning required. And that was when Lieutenant General Reed Calloway stopped walking. He stopped so completely that the whole terminal seemed to notice at once. His aides stopped with him. The security man's head came around. A 3-star does not stop in the middle of a floor for nothing, and every trained person in that building knew it. And the noise of the place dropped by half in the space of a breath. Calloway was looking at the woman on the bench, and the duffel on the floor, and the sergeant standing over her with the back of his hand still out. His face was doing something his aides had never seen it do. The easy, unhurried general, the man who had stopped needing to prove anything 3 ranks ago, was gone. What stood in his place was a 60-year-old man looking at the single most important morning of his life, sitting on a bolted bench, with her bag on the floor, being told to clear the row. The security man took a step, reading threat out of stillness the way he was trained to. Calloway stopped him with 2 fingers, without looking, the smallest motion. Nobody was in danger. That was not what this was. This was something the security man had no protocol for, and neither did the aides, and neither did the counter, and neither did the 140 tired travelers who had begun, one by one, to feel the temperature of the room change without knowing why. He crossed the floor himself. No aide sent ahead. No word passed down. A lieutenant general with 3 stars on his collar walked across his own terminal, through the parting crowd, to a bench against the far wall, and he stopped in front of a woman in jeans with a duffel at her feet, and he came to attention. He came to attention. A 3-star, in front of a master sergeant nobody in the room had bothered to badge. Master Sergeant Ashby. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. The terminal had gone quiet enough to hear a boarding pass drop. "It has been 21 years, Calloway said, and you look exactly like the best morning and the worst morning of my life, both at once. I have told your story more times than I can count. I have never once gotten it right, because there is no getting it right." He glanced, once, at the torn orders in her lap, and something crossed his face that was not anger, that was worse than anger, that was grief for a thing he could not undo fast enough. "Take my seat on the rotator. I'll wait for the next one. It would be the honor of my year to be bumped for you." The old sergeant major was on his feet, and he said the thing the terminal needed said, because someone had to put the plain words on it. "That's the Medal of Honor, son," Brennan said, and his voice was rough. "You tore up a Medal of Honor recipient's orders, and you put her at the back of your line, and you knocked her bag on the floor. That woman went up a ridge. Everybody else was coming down. There are men walking around this country today because she wouldn't quit on that hill." Calloway turned his head, just enough to take in the room, and he told them the rest, plainly, in the voice of a man who had told it 100 times and would tell it 100 more. 2005, he said. "A ridge above a valley you have never heard of and never will. My battalion got caught in the open at first light, with our wounded on the wrong side of the fire. This sergeant, 23 years old, went up that hill alone, when every instinct a person owns says come down. She held it. And then she carried my soldiers off it one at a time, across open rock, while I stood in the valley with a radio that could not help her and watched. There are men with children now because she would not quit on that hill. I put her in for the medal. It was the truest paper I ever signed." His voice thinned, and he let it. "I have been looking for the back of her head in every crowd for 21 years, and I found it here, on a bench, with her orders in 2 pieces." The terminal understood. It went through the room like a tide going out. People stood, here and there, and then everywhere, without an order, the oldest reflex the profession has, hands going still at their sides. Travelers who had no idea what a Category 3 was stood up because the people around them were standing up, and because a 3-star general was at attention in front of a woman in jeans. And some things do not need to be explained to be understood. An old man in a wheelchair by the window took his ball cap off. A little boy stood on a chair. The homecoming footage played on, silent, over a room that had become, for one strange minute, a homecoming of its own. Dane Kirby's face did what a face does when the floor turns to water. First the confusion, the blank refusal of the words to fit the woman. Then the disbelief, the small, ugly hope that this was a mistake, that the sergeant major was wrong, that the faked orders lady was the faked orders lady. Then the recognition, the whole morning replaying behind his eyes at speed, every flat word of it. Step aside and rebook, and I'd find another way and grab your bag and clear the row. And then, last, the horror, clean and total, as the man understood exactly what he had spent his morning doing, and to whom, in front of how many, with a 3-star now standing at attention to mark the size of it. His hand, the one that had swept the duffel, hung useless at his side. The woman they had bumped was being asked, by a lieutenant general, to take his seat. And she was, by a wide margin, the calmest person in the building. She did not take the seat first. She reached down and picked up her own duffel off the floor and set it back on the bench, unhurried, and only then did she look at the general. "You don't have to give me your seat, sir," she said. "I'll make a rotator. I always make a rotator." "I know you will," Calloway said. "Let an old man do this one thing anyway." Then the general turned, and the terminal saw the other side of him come up, the side that was not grief, and his eye went to the sergeant standing frozen at the edge of it. He said one word to his aide, "Quiet," and the aide reached for a notebook, and it was clear to everyone what came next. A name taken. A career ended before lunch. It would have been easy. It would have been just. Every person standing in that terminal would have called it fair. Marin Ashby stopped it. She did it with a hand on the general's sleeve, and a sentence, low, meant for him and not the room, though the room was quiet enough now to hear it anyway. "Leave him his job, sir." Calloway looked at her. "He wasn't cruel," she said. "He was certain. There's a difference, and he doesn't know it yet, and taking his stripes won't teach it to him. It'll just make him a man something bad happened to. Leave him the job. Teach him the difference. That's worth more than his rank, and it's a harder thing to carry, and I'd rather he carried it. If this story has gotten into your chest even a little, then do the small thing it is asking. Stay to the end of it. And if it moved you, subscribe, because the ones who could end a man and choose not to are the ones worth staying for." The general held her eyes a long moment. Then he nodded, once, and closed the notebook with a look, and left Dane Kirby standing in the wreck of his own certainty with the worst punishment available, a second chance, and the whole rest of his life to understand it. Kirby did the one thing left to him that was worth anything. He walked the orders down himself. He took the 2 torn halves off the bench where she had folded them, and he found tape, and he set the halves together on the counter, careful, corner to corner, the way she had folded them, and he pressed the tape down flat. Then he brought them back to her, and he held them out, and the apology he managed was mostly silence, because the words were too small, and he had the sense, finally, to know it. "Ma'am, I was wrong. all the way. Wrong. Maren took the taped orders. She looked at them, at the seam running down the middle where the morning had torn and been mended, the tape catching the light. She did not make him grovel. She could have. The whole room would have let her, would have wanted her to, would have called it justice. She had spent a career learning that the people who most deserve to make another person small are exactly the ones who refuse to, because they have seen what small really looks like, and they will not hand it to anyone. Then you already know more than you did when you woke up, she said. That's not nothing. Most people go a whole life without learning the difference between certain and right. You learned it before lunch, in front of a general, in the hardest way there is. Don't waste it feeling sorry. Carry it. Run your counter like the quiet one is always the one who went up the hill. Because sometimes she is. Over at the counter, Kip Sorensen had gone the color of the walls and looked like he wanted the floor to open and take him. He had laughed the loudest. He had done the little imitation. He had said, out loud, in a room, that she had printed her own orders on a home machine. And now, a 3-star was telling that room what she had actually done on a hill. And every one of the boy's own words was coming back on him at once, with the weight it had always been going to carry. The old sergeant major crossed to him. He did not do it to comfort the boy. He did it because a young man in that much shame is a young man about to learn either the right lesson or the wrong one, and which one depends entirely on who reaches him in the first 5 minutes. Brennan put a hand on the back of Sorensen's neck, not unkind, the way an old NCO has steered 1,000 young ones through the worst mornings of their lives, and he walked him toward the coffee urn, talking low. You're going to want to hate yourself for a while, Brennan told him. Don't. That's the easy road, and it's no good to anybody. She just watched a general offer to be bumped for her, and she spent her one favor keeping the man who tore her orders in his job. You think she did that so you could go hate yourself in a back room? Take what you feel right now, boy, and you make it into eyes. For the rest of your life. You look at the quiet ones. You walk the orders down. That's how you pay her back. And it's the only way there is. Whatever else Walt Brennan said to that boy over a cold pot of coffee, Kip Sorensen would run his counter differently for the rest of his life because of it. And somewhere down the years, a tired traveler nobody else looked at twice would get walked all the way home by a passenger service NCO who had learned, young, in a terminal, what the quiet ones can turn out to be. An hour later, Master Sergeant Myron Ashby sat in a window seat on the evening rotator, a general seat, given and taken with grace, the torn and taped orders folded once and resting in her lap. The engines spun up. The terminal fell away below the wing, small now, an ordinary building where an ordinary morning had tried to leave her behind, and a whole roomful of strangers had refused to let it stand. It was not the same as bringing Marcus Lowe down the ridge. Nothing would ever be that. But it was not nothing either. Somewhere down there, a young airman was learning to see the quiet ones, and a tired sergeant was taping a lesson to the inside of his chest, and a woman who had spent 21 years measuring her life against a single window she could not close was going home. A decent morning, she thought, watching the ground drop away. A decent morning after all. She closed her eyes. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.